I said move to the back of the bus, lady. Don't make me say it again.
The driver's voice sliced through the air, harsh, impatient, laced with the kind of authority that comes from years of no one daring to challenge it. The bus went silent. A woman in her late 60s, small in frame but tall in spirit, looked up from the rail she was holding. Her voice, when it came, was calm, too calm for the heat that filled the air.
I've paid my fare, sir. I'll sit where I please.
Gasps rippled through the passengers. A teenage boy froze, thumb hovering over the record button, uncertain if this was his moment to act or just another moment to scroll past. A young mother pulled her daughter close, whispering something that sounded like, "Don't stare." The driver's jaw flexed, his knuckles whitening on the wheel. You could see it, the way pride and anger mixed into something ugly. He wasn't used to being challenged, not by someone old enough to be his mother. In 5 minutes, people stopped pretending not to see, the world outside the bus would know her name. And this same driver, the man who barked orders, would be the one pleading for mercy. Because when you push a person too far, even the gentlest soul can become a spark that burns the whole house down. If you've ever seen someone hold their ground when the world told them to shrink, this story will feel close to home. And if you've ever wondered whether doing the right thing really changes anything, you'll want to stay till the end. Because in this story, karma doesn't come slowly, and it doesn't knock. Let's rewind. Before the anger, before the headlines, before the crowd, there was just an old woman named Mabel Johnson, a rainy Tuesday morning, and a bus ride she'll never forget. The city moved in routines, kettle whistles, laces tied, the ritual of umbrellas snapping open against a gray sky. Mabel Johnson moved with those rhythms too. At 72, she kept an evening job folding leaflets at the community center. Small money, smaller satisfaction, and on this particular Tuesday her hair was swept into a practical bun, her coat buttoned to the chin against a damp wind. She had the look of someone who had learned to live quietly and decisively, neat shoes, a modest handbag, and an expression that said she belonged to the world whether it asked for permission or not. The number 18 bus arrived with the indifferent sigh of a machine that has done this route 1,000 times. Its engine gave a polite cough as people stepped aboard, shoulders hunched against rain, backpacks slung, briefcases clasped. The driver, a man in his 40s with a uniform that strained just slightly across the chest, gave a curt nod to no one in particular. He was the sort of man who had learned how to be efficient and who, over time, had been rewarded for a certain bluntness. His name badge read Tom Reed. His voice when he spoke was practiced, crisp and final. Mabel dropped her change into the fare box and, steadying herself on the silver pole, looked for a seat. It was early, the bus was half full. She chose a seat near the front because her knees objected to long walks and because the stop she wanted required her to be off quickly. She had no expectation of drama. She had somewhere to go and a mind full of the little lists that keep days honest.
Not there,
Tom said, louder than necessary. His tone carried the brief spike of irritation that sometimes flares in strangers.
You need to sit further back.
Mabel looked up slowly. The bus fell elastic with tension in the half-second between question and answer. Around them people registered the exchange like something happening on a stage. A commuter's glance, a child's head tipped like a cocked ear, a student's phone lifting even before the image had formed.
I'm tired of moving for people's convenience,
Mabel said, and her sentence landed like a small stone. It was not loud. It did not aim to inflame. It simply made a point. Tom's mouth tightened.
These seats are priority. If you won't move, I'll have to ask you to get off. Simple as that.
There are moments that arrive unannounced and then compress into a single, crystalline memory. For some passengers, it was the pause, the very human hesitation when someone asks you to pick a side. No one wanted to be the first to speak. No one wanted to be the one who made things worse. The morning timetable ticked on, indifferent to conscience. Mabel shifted, her hand smoothing the fabric of her coat.
I paid my fare.
She said,
I am not leaving my seat because you say so.
Tom's jaw flexed with something that was part irritation, part accumulated entitlement. He reached for his radio with a theatrical carelessness that turned every head. Dispatch, this is Route 18. Passenger refusing to comply with driver instruction. Please advise. There is a cruelty to being told you don't belong in public places. It is a slow erosion of ordinary dignity, the kind you only notice once it has been chipped away over years. A curt tone here, a clipped remark there, the sigh that follows when a human being dares to insist on a small comfort. People gathered those old memories in the way spectators might collect evidence. A young woman in a smart overcoat looked away as if embarrassed to have been born in a society that could still condone such things. A man in a suit tightened his grip on his newspaper until the paper crinkled. Someone in the middle rows, a boy in his 20s with earbuds, shifted and prized his phone out of his pocket. We are at our best and worst in public. The boy's thumb hovered over the record button for a long second. Then it landed. He angled the camera to catch more than the exchange, to capture a posture, a look, a pattern. Another passenger, older, leaned forward and said in a voice that was equal parts curiosity and fatigue, "Why don't you just move?" Mabel smiled, and the smile was quick, like light across a window. "Because if I move now, I tell him he can do it again to someone else. Because sitting there is small, letting him push me off it is bigger. Do you understand?" Understanding came slowly to human crowds. It travels by degrees, carried on the currents of another's courage. The bus hummed, the rain tattooed the windows in a steady rhythm. Tom stabbed his finger toward an empty row. "You're delaying everyone," he snapped. "You're holding us up." "It's 5 minutes," the young man with the phone said quietly. "You'll be fine." Someone laughed then, an unsteady, relieved sound that seemed to hold a little of the bus's tension in check. But laughter does not always translate into action. Fear is practical, solidarity is not. Tom's face reddened. "If you don't leave, I'll call security," he said. His tone had shifted into a register that hoped to frighten. There are administrative muscles that people learn to use: the threat of authority, the invocation of rules, the performance of consequence. He reached for the loudspeaker as if it were a cudgel. A woman in the back, whose hands were braided with years of grocery shopping dramas, put down her carrier and spoke up with a clarity that surprised herself. "Let her sit. It's a seat, not a war." The words were simple and appeared to loosen something in the cabin. Heads turned. The damp shyness of the morning gave way to a very human discomfort with blatant meanness. Tom hesitated, and in hesitation the bus rotated on an axis of potential. He had authority in his hands and shame in his voice. He radioed anyway, requesting assistance at Route 18. His hand shook in a human way beneath the uniform sleeve. The boy's recording light glowed brighter as he uploaded a clip to the social network perched in everyone's palm. Within seconds, a tiny notification chimed. Processing. Small ripples became signals. Outside, the bus idled at the curb and a handful of pedestrians paused, curious. The officers would not arrive in 5 minutes. They would not arrive in 2. But the idea of an audience had congealed. People at bus stops glanced up, strangers walking dogs stopped mid-stride. A woman on the pavement held her toddler and watched. The bus, designed to ferry people quickly and anonymously from A to B, had become a social theater. Mabel folded her hands in her lap. In her face there was a calmness that made the passengers feel chastened. She spoke then, and the bus leaned in as if the timbre of her voice could write a scale. "I will not be made smaller so someone else can feel larger," she said. "And if standing for that means we all sit 5 minutes longer, then I'll take the inconvenience." A murmur rolled through the seats. Some were nods, others were mutters of discomfort. But the tenor had shifted. The young man lowered his phone for a second and caught her eyes. "You're doing the right thing," he said. It was a small, ordinary phrase, but it carried a great weight. Tom's face hardened. He looked like a man who had been taught his place by habits rather than empathy. He moved toward the wheel, throat tight. "All right then," he muttered. "See how you like the attention." And then, in the hush that preceded the next move, the bus door hissed as a police car slowed outside, its engine a distant insistence. Someone in the middle row breathed, the sound sharp enough to be heard. The recording finished uploading. A notification chimed. A single comment flashed onto the screen of the boy's phone. "This is why we speak up." Mabel's fingers tightened around her bag. She turned her face slightly to watch the rain on the window as if, in those silver streaks, she were already seeing the shape of what might come next. The bus was full of people who had stories they had not yet told. Outside, a small crowd was beginning to gather. Inside, a driver with a badge had made a choice that would expand beyond his control. And in the middle of it all, Mabel sat, an ordinary woman who had decided that her dignity was non-negotiable. The brakes hummed. The bus did not move. For 2 minutes, the bus sat suspended between motion and paralysis. Engines idling, wipers squeaking against a drizzle that had thickened into rain. The city outside kept moving, cars edging past, horns sounding distantly, but inside the 18A, time felt heavy. The passengers had become an audience. Every breath, every twitch of the driver's jaw was part of the performance now. Mabel Johnson didn't move. Her hands rested on her handbag, the skin on her knuckles thin and veined, but her grip was firm. The lines on her face were neither fragile nor weak. They were carved by years of small injustices she'd swallowed and long commutes she'd endured without complaint. She wasn't angry. She was tired of being told to move, to wait, to be quiet. Tom Reed's voice broke the silence. "Last warning, lady. Back of the bus or off?" His tone had shifted, less professional now, more personal. The kind of tone people use when they feel control slipping through their fingers. His radio crackled faintly, dispatch confirming that transit security was on their way. "Sir," Mabel said evenly, her voice soft but unwavering, "if your job gives you the power to humiliate people, then maybe you're doing the wrong job." The sentence hit harder than a shout would have. You could almost hear the bus lean back. A young man in his 20s, the one with the phone still recording, exhaled loudly, shaking his head. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "She's not doing anything wrong." The teenage girl beside him whispered, "He's going to regret this." At the front, Tom's neck flushed red. His reflection in the windshield was a blur of anger and self-righteousness. "You think you can talk to me like that? You think you can embarrass me in front of everyone?" he snapped. Mabel looked at him the way you look at a child who's just thrown a tantrum. Almost pitying. "Son," she said, her voice low, "respect is earned, not demanded." It was the first time anyone had ever called him son in that tone. Not warm, not affectionate, but with a weight that reminded him he wasn't as big as he thought. Something flickered in his face, a flash of shame quickly buried under fury. He slammed his palm against the steering wheel. "That's it. Everyone sit tight. I'm not moving this bus until she's off." A ripple of groans followed. A few passengers muttered under their breath. A young mother rocked her restless toddler, whispering, "Just ignore him, sweetheart." But not everyone was irritated. Some were watching Mabel closely, as if realizing this moment was bigger than a delay on their morning route. The young man with the phone stood up halfway, his voice firm now. "Hey man, you can't do this. She's not hurting anyone." Tom's glare snapped to him. "Sit down. This isn't your business." "It's everyone's business when someone gets treated like trash," the man shot back. The air turned electric. Someone gasped. And then, a soft voice from the back. "He's right." It was the middle-aged woman who'd been sitting quietly with her shopping bag on her lap. She spoke again, louder this time, her words trembling but resolute. She paid her fare like everyone else. Just drive the bus. Tom turned in his seat, scanning the faces that were now looking at him, not in fear, but in quiet disapproval. He saw the teenage girl, the mother, the boy recording, the older man with the newspaper who had finally lowered it. A driver knows when the bus has turned on him. He puffed his chest. "You all think this is a democracy, huh? You don't tell me how to do my job." But the conviction in his voice was fading, replaced by something almost desperate. The kind of desperation that grows when you realize the crowd isn't with you anymore. Mabel hadn't moved an inch. "You could have just let people ride in peace," she said softly. "But pride's a heavy thing, isn't it?" The bus fell silent again, except for the steady patter of rain. Through the front window, flashing lights appeared in the distance, the blue and red reflection flickering across the puddled street. Transit security had arrived. The young man recording lowered his phone briefly and whispered, "Here we go." When the officers climbed aboard, the atmosphere changed instantly. Two men in dark uniforms scanned the aisle, their expressions already weary, used to situations that start loud and end awkwardly. The taller officer, lean and gray-haired, nodded at the driver. "What's going on, sir?" Tom was quick to speak. "Passengers refusing to follow instructions. Disrupting the route. I had to call it in." The officer's eyes shifted to Mabel, who sat quietly near the front, her umbrella balanced neatly between her knees. She didn't look disruptive. She looked like someone waiting for common sense to arrive. "Ma'am," the officer said carefully, "what seems to be the issue here?" Mabel looked up, her voice calm and measured. "No issue. I paid my fare, sat where there was space, and he decided I didn't belong here." The second officer glanced at the driver, then back at her. "Not belong." Tom interjected quickly. "Priority seating. She's blocking." "She's elderly," the first officer interrupted sharply. "She's the priority." A low murmur ran through the bus. Someone laughed softly, not mockingly but with the relief of watching arrogance trip over itself. Tom's face drained of color. The older officer turned toward him fully now. "Sir, step outside with me a moment." Tom hesitated. "But..." "Now." As the two men stepped off the bus, the younger officer stayed behind, standing quietly by the door. The tension inside began to loosen, conversations bubbling like a kettle starting to boil. The teenage girl leaned toward Mabel. "You okay, ma'am?" Mabel smiled faintly. "I've been through worse mornings, dear." Outside, the older officer's voice carried faintly through the drizzle. "We've had 3 complaints about you this month, Tom. This doesn't look good." "I was just doing my job." Tom protested. "Your job's to drive people safely, not insult them." From inside, the passengers could see the scene through fogged windows, the driver's gestures growing frantic, the officer's patient stance. The young man with the phone pressed record again. "Man's digging his own grave," he muttered. Mabel's gaze followed the shapes outside the glass, calm, almost detached. She wasn't gloating. She wasn't even smiling. There was something sad in her eyes, the kind of sadness that comes from recognizing a familiar pattern. She'd seen men like Tom her whole life, loud, entitled, convinced the world owed them deference. After a few minutes, the officer reboarded the bus, without Tom. "All right, folks," he said, brushing rain from his shoulders. "The route's going to continue shortly. We've arranged for a replacement driver." A small wave of applause broke out, hesitant at first, then growing. It wasn't rowdy or mocking, just human. A collective exhale after holding their breath too long. The officer looked to Mabel. "You all right, ma'am?" "I'm fine," she said simply. "Thank you for doing what's right." He nodded once, respectfully. "Wouldn't have had to if you hadn't stood your ground." The bus shifted again, the moment settling into memory. The teenage girl whispered to her friend, "She's like the calmest person I've ever seen." The young man sent the video to his group chat with a caption, "Grandma just changed the game." Outside, the flashing lights dimmed. Inside, the tension dissolved into conversation. Murmurs about fairness, decency, and how strange it is that a small act of standing still can move an entire crowd. As the replacement driver boarded, a woman with kind eyes and rain in her hair, Mabel finally allowed herself a breath. She didn't know the video was already spreading across the city. She didn't know her name was about to trend on social media. And she certainly didn't know that Tom Reed's day was about to spiral into a kind of reckoning he'd never imagined. But she did know one thing as she sat quietly by the window watching the city roll past again. By noon, the video had traveled farther than the 18A bus ever could. It began as a few shaky clips shared in a local community group, titled simply, "Elderly Woman Stands Her Ground on Morning Bus." Within an hour, it was reposted with captions like, "Driver Humiliates Pensioner, Instant Karma." Then came the comments. Waves of outrage, support, disbelief. The faces of strangers had become symbols. The world was watching, and everyone had an opinion. But Mabel Johnson knew none of that as she walked home later that evening, her shopping bag swinging gently at her side. Her knees ached, and the drizzle had turned into a steady, persistent rain. She was thinking about what to cook for dinner, maybe soup, something simple. For her, it was just another day she had survived without bending. When she reached her small red brick house at the corner of Brookside and Maple, her neighbor, Mr. Patel, was standing on his porch, phone in hand. "Mrs. Johnson," he called out, half laughing, half amazed. "You've gone viral." She frowned, squinting through the rain. "Viral?" He hurried over, phone screen glowing. "You haven't seen it? It's you. The whole city's talking about you." Mabel took the phone gently, her brow furrowing as she watched herself on the screen. That same bus, her own voice, her small defiance now broadcast to thousands. The caption beneath read, "Elderly woman refuses to move, bus driver learns his lesson." "Oh dear," she murmured. "I didn't mean for any of this." Mr. Patel grinned. "Sometimes the truth doesn't need permission, Mrs. J." She smiled faintly, shaking her head. "I just wanted to get to work." By the next morning, the story had reached the local news. The headline was everywhere. "Bus driver suspended after verbal altercation with elderly passenger." At first, the article painted it as a misunderstanding. But then came the footage, clearer now, edited, subtitled, looped. Every second of Tom Reed's arrogance was captured. His tone, his threats, the flash of anger when Mabel refused to obey. And then, the calm, piercing dignity in her voice that cut through it all. The video became a mirror people couldn't look away from. Some saw their mothers. Some saw themselves. And others, the uncomfortable few, saw a reflection of the power they'd abused without thinking. At the transit office, Tom Reed sat slumped across from his supervisor, sweat beading on his brow. The camera crews were outside the building, news vans parked along the street. His face had been on every feed for 24 hours, the man who told an old woman to sit at the back. "You've made us a laughingstock," his supervisor said, voice flat. "Do you understand how bad this looks?" Tom's hands tightened into fists. "She provoked me. She was being difficult. You know how people are." "Enough." The word hit like a hammer. "We've received 8 formal complaints, Tom. Not just from yesterday, from before. You think that many people are lying?" Tom's mouth opened, then closed again. He looked smaller now, deflated. The world he thought belonged to him, where power meant never being questioned, was crumbling. "We're suspending you without pay," his supervisor continued, "pending a full investigation." Tom's voice dropped to a whisper. "She made me look weak." His supervisor leaned forward, eyes cold. "No, Tom. You did that yourself." Across the city, at the community center where Mabel worked, people she'd known for years were now looking at her differently. The young receptionist, Lauren, rushed to her the moment she walked in. "Mabel, you're famous," she exclaimed. "Everyone's talking about how brave you were." Mabel smiled gently. "Brave?" she repeated. "I wasn't brave. I was just tired." Lauren frowned. "Tired?" Mabel placed her hand over the young woman's. "There comes a point when being quiet feels heavier than speaking." That's all it was. Her coworkers gathered around, some clapping her on the back, others just nodding with admiration. But beneath the warmth, Mabel felt uneasy. She hadn't wanted fame, she wanted fairness. And fairness, she knew, rarely came quietly. That evening, as she returned home, she found an envelope taped to her front door. Inside was a simple note, written in rushed handwriting. "Thank you for standing up when I couldn't. A passenger from the 18A." She folded it carefully and placed it on her mantle. The words warmed her, but they also carried a weight. How many others had stayed silent that day? How many had wanted to speak and didn't? 2 days later, reporters came knocking. A young journalist named Marcus Hayes stood on her porch, microphone in hand, his tone polite but eager. "Mrs. Johnson, would you mind sharing your side of the story? The public wants to hear from you directly." Mabel looked at him for a long moment. What would they want to hear? "Anything you'd like to say about what happened, about the driver, the system, what this means for others?" She hesitated. Cameras made her uncomfortable. But then she thought of that note, and of the quiet woman in the back of the bus who had whispered, "Let her sit." Maybe silence wasn't an option anymore. "All right," she said softly. "Come in." The interview aired that same evening. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was simple. "I don't hate that man," Mabel said, eyes steady on the camera. "He was doing what too many people do, confusing power with respect. I just hope he learns there's a difference." The clip spread even faster than the first video. Comments poured in, thousands of them. "She's pure grace. This woman's strength made me cry. Why does it take people like her to remind us what decency looks like?" For a few days, Mabel Johnson became a symbol, not of rage, but of quiet resistance. But symbols, she knew, were fragile things. And in the background, a different story was brewing, one she hadn't seen coming. At a pub across town, a former colleague of Tom Reed slammed his pint glass on the counter. "You hear what they're saying about him? Racist, violent, disgrace. They're ruining the man's life over a few words." A friend shrugged. "The video's pretty clear, mate." Tom's colleague scowled. "It's edited. You don't see what came before. They'll eat you alive online these days." And somewhere, amid the noise and bitterness, a phone camera flashed again, because people had started following Tom, recording him, whispering about him. His arrogance had become his cage, and the internet his judge. Back in her home, Mabel sat by the window, watching the rain. The note from the passenger still lay on her mantel, next to an old photo of her late husband. She traced her finger along the frame and whispered, "You always told me to speak up, Arthur." "I finally did." Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "We're organizing a rally for equality in public service. Would you speak?" She sighed softly, half smiling. "Me? I'm just a woman who caught a bus." But deep down, she knew the world had already decided otherwise. What she didn't know, however, was that before the week was out, Tom Reed would confront her face to face. Not with a shout this time, but with something she never expected. That sometimes, the only way to move forward is to refuse to move at all. For 3 days, the city wouldn't stop talking. Clips still bounced around the internet. The video replayed on news loops, stitched into opinion videos, dissected by strangers who didn't know either of them. But trends fade. The outrage moved on. And somewhere in that quiet space that comes after the noise, reality set in. Tom Reed had stopped leaving his flat. The walls seemed smaller now, the windows dirtier. His phone was full of missed calls, not from friends, but from numbers he didn't recognize. Some were journalists, others just people looking for a reaction. His face had been turned into memes. "Back of the bus, huh?" The comment sections tore him apart. It wasn't the punishment that hurt most. It was the silence that followed. The world had moved on, but he was still stuck in that bus. The rain, the reflection of his own anger on the windshield, the way her eyes had looked at him. Not with hatred, with disappointment. It ate at him. Across town, Mabel Johnson's life had changed too, but not in the way people thought. Yes, she was recognized on the street. Yes, people stopped her to say, "You're an inspiration." But inspiration doesn't pay bills or ease the stiffness in her knees. She still woke at dawn, brewed her tea, and went to her part-time job at the community center. And if she was honest, the fame embarrassed her. Because it wasn't bravery that made her stand still that day. It was exhaustion. It was a Friday when their paths crossed again. Mabel was standing outside the grocer's, waiting for her bus, the new 18A. The air smelled like rain and petrol. She didn't notice the man watching from across the street at first, head down, clutching a paper bag. When he finally approached, it took her a moment to recognize him. Tom Reed. But the uniform was gone. The arrogance too. He looked older, not in years, but in posture. His shoulders carried something heavy. "Mabel," he said quietly. "Not Mrs. Johnson, not ma'am. Just Mabel." She turned, cautious but calm. "Mr. Reed." He looked at the pavement when he spoke. "I don't have a job anymore. They said I was a liability. Said I embarrassed the department." Mabel nodded slowly. Actions have a way of showing who we are. He winced. "I know. I deserved it." Then, after a pause, "I came to say I'm sorry. Properly this time. Not because of the cameras. Because I realized what I did wasn't about rules. It was about pride. For a moment, she said nothing. Just studied him. His hands shook slightly as he gripped the paper bag. "You think saying sorry fixes it?" she asked softly. "No," he said. "But it's all I've got left." The bus pulled up behind her, brakes hissing. Mabel didn't move. "I used to think people like you made life harder," Tom continued. "Always questioning, always standing your ground. But now I see, it's people like me who make it harder for everyone else." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. The silence between them said more than pity could. Tom swallowed hard. "There's something else." He reached into the bag and pulled out a small envelope. "They sent me my last pay. I didn't earn it. Feels wrong keeping it. Thought maybe you could donate it to wherever you work. For someone who needs it more." She took it without a word, eyes still on him. "And what about you?" He gave a tired smile. "I'll manage." Then he turned to leave. No drama, no final word. Just walked away into the drizzle, blending into the ordinary rhythm of a city that had already forgotten him. That evening, Mabel placed the envelope on the counter at the community center. Inside was a short note written in shaky handwriting. "I was wrong. I saw myself in the mirror and didn't like what I saw. Thank you for making me look." Tom read. She stared at it for a long time before folding it neatly and slipping it into the donation box. A week later, she boarded a different bus, Route 22 this time. The driver, a young woman with tired eyes, smiled and said, "Morning, love." Mabel smiled back. "Morning." The bus was half empty. A man near the middle was arguing with the driver about the fare machine not working. His voice was rising, sharp, impatient, the way Tom's had been once. The driver kept calm, explaining she couldn't override the system. But his voice got louder until passengers started shifting uneasily. And then Mabel spoke. "Sir," she said from her seat, not shouting but firm. "If raising your voice fixed machines, the world would be a very different place." The man froze. The passengers chuckled. The tension dissolved. The driver glanced in the mirror, smiling gratefully. "Thank you, ma'am." Mabel shrugged lightly. "Just trying to get to work." But as the bus rolled forward, a teenage boy pulled out his phone and whispered to his friend, "Wait, that's her, isn't it? The bus lady?" Mabel sighed, smiling faintly to herself. Not this again. Later that night, as she sat by the window with a cup of tea, the TV played in the background. Another local segment, this time about new citywide reforms in public transport, mandatory conduct training for all drivers. The anchor's voice continued. These changes were inspired, officials say, by a viral video earlier this year, the now famous bus stand incident. Mabel turned down the volume. The tea was cooling in her hands, the city lights blinking beyond her reflection. Justice, she thought, doesn't always arrive in courtrooms. Sometimes, it slips quietly into policy meetings, in the rules people rewrite when no one's watching. She smiled softly. "That'll do." And somewhere across town, in a small cafe, Tom Reed was wiping down tables, apron tied clumsily around his waist. His manager, a cheerful woman in her 50s, called from behind the counter, "Tom, there's an elderly lady out front who says she wants a tea and no sugar." She turned and froze. Through the glass, he saw her. Mabel, sitting by the window, newspaper folded neatly, waiting patiently, as if this had been the plan all along. For a long moment, their eyes met. No anger, no resentment, just quiet acknowledgement. A circle closed, an understanding reached. He walked over, poured the tea carefully, and set it before her. "Still working on your manners, I see," she said gently. He gave a small, rueful smile. "One customer at a time." She nodded. "That's a start." The camera of life didn't zoom out. There was no grand applause. No triumphant music. Just two people, once strangers divided by pride, now bound by something truer, a shared understanding of what respect really costs. Because karma doesn't always hit loud. Sometimes, it lands quietly, in the kind of silence that makes people finally listen. If this story made you think, even for a second, about how we treat the people around us, don't scroll away just yet. Click subscribe, leave a comment, and tell me what you would have done if you were on that bus. Because stories like this aren't just about them, they're about all of us.